Hi everyone, welcome back to SteamFlow. Today's video is going to be about lossless scaling, and I wanted to kind of reflect on the tool and my usage of it and all of my testing. I tested over 50 games with it. I made 3 videos about it, testing games, and you guys left a ton of comments, a ton of questions. You requested different games. There's been a lot of comments on both ends of the spectrum. Some of you say that it doesn't work at all, others say that it's possible. Some of you said that it's a scam, but a lot of you have also shared that this is a game-changing thing and that it really helped them play more games on the Steam Deck. So I wanted to talk about this. So the developer PancakeTask did release a 1.0 version that should iron out a lot of the bugs, and it should be a lot more stable than what we've been testing previously. I've been told that this version also works with the Decky plugin. You just need to make sure that you update to it, and then you can use it with the Decky plugin that exists for it. I'm not going to talk about the plugin at all. I think that's a separate topic. I am going to talk about my experience using the tool as it is, the games that I tested, and I'm going to go over some of your comments, and then I'm going to reflect on whether this is actually a useful thing to have and whether it has a place in the Steam Deck's future. Now, for those of you who stumbled upon this video and don't know what I'm talking about, the LSFG or the lossless scaling frame generation tool is a tool that basically allows you to double your frame rate in most, if not all, Steam Deck games. So if you're on LCD and you have 30 FPS, that can go up to 60, and on OLED, if you have 45 FPS, that can go to 90. That's the basics of it. Now you can also take 30 FPS on the OLED and try and turn it into 90. The less FPS you're working with, the worse results you're gonna get. So on LCD, you're always looking to have at least 30 FPS in order to turn that to 60, and on the OLED, you're at least you're gonna need at least 45 to turn that into smooth 90. Now, a lot of people in the comments said that they don't see a difference at all, both in the videos that I shared and with their own testing, especially on the LCD with 60 FPS. Even if it says 60 FPS on the FPS counter, they don't actually feel that it's any smooth. And this is something that I also encountered. I think the difference gets a lot more noticeable on the OLED, and you really need to have at least 45 stable to get that to 90 stable. As soon as it goes below 90, like 80, 85, you're gonna see that it's still not as smooth as it should be. And if you're playing with just 45 FPS and without using the tool, it's actually gonna feel better. So I understand how a lot of you said that this is not working at all and that it's not worth it. You really need to be meeting the right conditions in order for it to work. In all of the 50 or 55 games I tested, it probably only worked really well for like 6, 7, maybe 8 games. It's mostly stable in games that don't have that big of a movement, because it will also introduce artifacts, especially around the edge of the screen. For example, I tested it with Need for Speed games, and it made the bottom of the car and the road below the car at the bottom of the screen repeat itself many times, introducing more and more artifacts. So it wasn't really a good experience. Even though you could feel that it was smoother, it was definitely not the correct way to play the game. Now, with all of that in mind, I am gonna go over some of the comments that I received on my lossless scaling videos. Probably the main question that I get is there any input lag when using lossless scaling? There is some input lag, but if you've used frame generation in other games that have had it built in internally, like for example Horizon, a lot of the newer PlayStation games like Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, they all have frame generation built in, and for a lot of these games the frame generation is not great, mainly because the games don't really reach 30 FPS. For example, Horizon for sure, and maybe Spider-Man 2 and God of War work actually pretty well, but Horizon for sure, you're not gonna get much out of the frame generation because the game doesn't hold steady 30 FPS. That being said, this tool is like an overlay on top of the game, so it doesn't mess directly with the game's frame rate, and input lag is very minimal. But the basics of how it actually works, there is no way to not have input lag, because it needs to see the frame in order to generate more frames from it. So there's always going to be an input lag, but it's really not noticeable. At least I don't really notice it when playing. Like I'm still able to hit all the spells that I need to hit. There's been some games where you can turn the analog and you can definitely see that it's not responding immediately. With this tool, it's not going to be the case. It's definitely still very playable, even in games like Clear Obscure, where you have to dodge, you have to be very specific with timing. it's all still possible to play the whole game with or lossless scaling, and you're not gonna feel the input lag unless you really have an eye for it. If you're trying to play a fast movement game like a competitive shooter or something, maybe you're gonna be able to feel it. For me personally, I've been playing games for more than 20 years and I didn't feel it. Maybe I'm just getting too old. I just didn't feel any issues in terms of input lag. Now another question is, does this hurt the Steam Deck in any way? And for the most part, I don't think it does. Now you do need some GPU overhead in order for this to work great. As I said, if a game doesn't reach 30 FPS and you're already pushing your Steam Deck to the max, it's not gonna do you any favors. So you need to be having at least 30 FPS and maybe your GPU working at 75-80%, and then you can push this. It doesn't make the Steam Deck overheat, it doesn't drain battery, and for the most part it's not gonna help with battery as well. Now in some cases it will. There's been a lot of comments with people testing older titles where they will purposefully reduce the Steam Deck's TDP and make the game, for example, you have a game that runs perfectly at 60 FPS, let's say a title from 2016. The game runs perfectly at 60 FPS. If you lower the Steam Deck's TDP, you can make the game go down to 30, and then you can use this tool on top of that to make it go to 60. So that will definitely give you some more battery life, but personally I haven't done any tests like that. I'm not really sure if it's going to improve the experience. If you're really after battery life, you're not going to be able to charge your Steam Deck for some time. Maybe that's just a trick that you can do, but I don't think it will give you a good experience. If you're able to run the game at 60 FPS, just do it. Other people have asked if you can actually bump up the graphical settings of older games that would run at 60 FPS, for example, on lower settings. You put them to medium or high settings and they start to run at 30 FPS, and then use this tool. This is absolutely viable, but again, you do need to have some GPU left, like some percentage of GPU overhead, in order to use this as smoothly as possible, because it's going to spike up and down a little bit. And I think that's the biggest issue that I encountered with it, is that I could never get a game to stay at 60 specifically or at 90. It would always spike up and down, and that's the biggest issue I had with it. It wasn't really stable in any of the games I tested. Now one guy said, many games tested are only placebo. It's clear from your footage that the screen frame rate didn't increase. I tested it on my Steam Deck and it's a waste of time. That's absolutely not true, but as I said again, the effect is more noticeable on OLED than on the LCD. Manuel Lango said, what he's not telling you is that the response time is bad, the input lag is the worst, I don't recommend. As I said, I personally didn't have any issues with it. Maybe some people are more sensitive to input lag, but a lot of people report that even using this, the games are still perfectly playable. Some guys said, I have it in opinion, it's not worth it, and then they updated the comments, said, update, I changed my opinion, it's definitely worth it. You literally double your frames with minor artifacts, which is not noticeable, and you have the same or better latency. Again, you're gonna have to test a couple of games. If you're willing to make this work, you're gonna have to tinker a little bit, and for some games it's gonna work great, for others it's not gonna work that well. It's not a one-pill solution, and it's definitely gonna take a lot more tinkering than playing. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you can definitely use it. I think what this tool really exposed is that me personally, as somebody who has to test games on the Steam Deck daily, I've started to look too much into the FPS counter. Back when I was a kid, I was really happy that the game just ran. Like, I would get a game from the store, I didn't even know what the requirements would be. I would just put the CD in my PC. Yes, I'm that old, I use CDs. And I would just hope that I would be able to install the game and then run it. Nowadays, we're just not satisfied with the game running. We need it to be 60 FPS, 90 FPS, 144 FPS, and I get that for some games you really do need the extra smoothness, especially for competitive shooters. I can understand the difference between 90 and 240 Hz and FPS, but the truth is that a lot of people would still enjoy a game running at 30 FPS if they didn't look at the FPS counter. So for a lot of these games, even though they felt smoother, I could definitely see the difference between 30, 60 and 90 FPS. I think we're starting to focus too much on the FPS and we're treating it like a scoreboard. Every time there's a new game coming out on the Steam Deck subreddit, I see posts appearing about whether this game is going to run, how much FPS we're going to get. Like, for example, Mafia: The Old Country is coming out in a week, and people have already started posting the minimum requirements and asking how much FPS they're gonna get out of it. Now I'm sure I have a very specific case because I really have to look at the FPS, look at the battery life, because that's what I've based my channel around. I review games based on their performance on the Steam Deck, but I'm sure that a lot of users who actually use the Steam Deck as it's meant to be, as a handheld device to just play on it daily, they don't have the FPS counter turned up all the time. Maybe they'll turn it up once they launch the game, they'll try and tweak a few optimizations to get it stable, and then they'll just turn it off. Maybe just don't turn it on at all. Unless your game is stuttering and unless you want to see the battery life at all times, maybe it's better off just turning it off completely, like on the 0 setting, not even the FPS counter in the top left. Just turn off FPS completely and see if you can actually still enjoy the game, because I tried that. After testing 50 games with the frame generation tool, I just ran a couple of games without any FPS counters at all, and I found myself still enjoying a lot of the games. Unless it's really hindering your gameplay, you're better off not looking at the FPS. You don't really need to be chasing 60, 90 FPS or whatever. Honestly, 30 FPS, especially since you're playing with a controller and on a smaller screen like the Steam Deck, and it can still give you an amazing gaming experience. That's going to be a bit of a boomer comment, but I think people focus a lot more on graphics and performance of the games instead of actual gameplay, story, and whether the game is good in terms of these aspects. And if you stop looking at the FPS counter for a minute, maybe you'll start appreciating games a lot more. I've been thinking about this for a while now, but the recent test with the lossless scaling frame generation tool pretty much made me think about this all over again. And I think we're honestly better off not looking at the FPS. As I said, if a game doesn't stutter, doesn't give you any performance issues, 30 FPS is perfectly fine for most games, like 90% of games. And a lot of the times in my videos, you're gonna hear me say that if we can get at least 30 stable on a new game that came out in 2025, if we can get at least 30 FPS stable on the Steam Deck, that's good enough for me. Even if we have to use FSR, as long as I can read the text, I'm still gonna have a good time playing this game. It's obviously not gonna be as good as playing it on the main PC, but a lot of people only have the Steam Deck. And being able to play the newest AAA titles with 30 FPS, something that 3 or 4 years ago was the norm on home consoles, I think that's pretty good. So do yourself a favor, turn off the FPS counter and try to enjoy some games on your Steam Deck. So what does all of this mean for the future of handhelds, for the future of Steam Deck? I think we're definitely going to see a lot more of these types of technologies. It's either going to be FSR, where we're actually upscaling from a lower resolution to a bigger one, or it's either going to be some sort of frame generation. There's been some rumors about a new AMD processor that's probably going to be used for the Steam Deck too, and it's definitely gone leaps in terms of processing power, but the main issue is battery life. So if you have a device of the same size, we're not going to have much better battery life with a much bigger processor. If you have to increase the TDP, the voltage use of the processor, you're not going to get a much better battery life than 2.5 hours. So they're always going to chase each other, CPU battery life, CPU battery life. So you are going to have to use some tricks in order to make the whole package work. You're going to have to use upscaling, you're going to have to use frame generation. And yeah, it's fake frames, there are artifacts, and a lot of people prefer to play the game natively. But I think these technologies are here to stay. Hopefully with time they're gonna get to a point where you're not gonna notice if they're turned on or off. And what I really hope for is that we get the types of games where I don't really care if it runs at 30 or 60 FPS. Like for example, Clair Obscur, you can definitely play this game most of the game at 30 FPS. There will be some points where it's gonna drop below 30 FPS, but you can definitely play most of the game on Steam Deck, and it's a fantastic game. It's gameplay wise, story wise, music wise, it really is a great game. So yeah, this video turned out to be a bit of a ramble, but I think the main point I wanted to make is, yeah, the tool absolutely works. It's not gonna be great for all games. It's not gonna be for all people. It's not gonna be that great on the LCD as it is on the OLED, but Again, you might not really need it in some games. There's a lot of games that run perfectly fine at 30 FPS and you can experience the full game at 30 FPS. As long as you don't focus on the FPS and turn off the FPS counter, I think you can still have a great time with a lot of games on the Steam Deck. So that's gonna be it. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, consider subscribing, and let me know in the comments, have you been using the lossless scaling frame ratio tool on your Steam Deck? Do you spend more time playing games on your Steam Deck instead of tinkering with them? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.